We live in a world where success is measured by numbers, revenue, rankings, titles, promotions. We chase goals, climb ladders, and strive to win. And yet, when we reach the top, many of us feel empty, disconnected, anxious, or exhausted. We've built systems, organizations, and societies that reward performance, but not people. We have confused authority with leadership, compliance with commitment, and control with courage. And in the process, we have forgotten why we started in the first place. The gap between what we achieve and what we feel is not accidental, it is by design. Fear-based leadership, short-term thinking, and relentless pursuit of efficiency have created workplaces and communities where burnout is normal, creativity is stifled, and people feel unseen. Disconnection is everywhere. Inequality grows. Trust erodes. We have become so focused on outcomes that we forget the human beings who create them. But here's the truth. Leadership is not about control. Leadership is not about titles or perks or the size of your corner office. The best leaders are the ones who leave a lasting impact, do something radically different. They create confidence in others. They inspire people to believe not just in the vision, but in themselves. They make individuals feel safe to take risks, to speak up, to innovate, and to grow. They understand that the true measure of leadership is the strength and resilience of the people around you, not the numbers on a balance sheet. Confidence is contagious. Trust is the currency of leadership. When people feel secure, valued, and respected, they perform at their best not because they are forced, not because they fear failure, but because they are inspired by purpose. When leaders put service before status, empathy before expediency, and integrity before image, they create an environment where human potential can flourish. This is the leadership our world desperately needs. Not the kind that manipulates or intimidates, not the kind that prioritizes short-term gains over long-term well-being, not the kind that pits people against each other in a race for recognition, but the kind that asks, how can I make you feel confident, capable, and courageous? The kind that says, I'm here to serve you and help you succeed, because your success is the success of all of us. The modern struggles we face, burnout, disconnection, inequality, are symptoms of leadership that loses sight of its purpose. Systems built without a clear why fail the very people they are meant to serve. Fear-based leadership might deliver results, but it erodes trust, creativity, and resilience. And when we lose trust in our leaders, we lose confidence in ourselves, and society loses its capacity to grow together. We have a choice. We can continue down the path of transactional leadership, of systems that demand compliance, of cultures that breed fear, or we can choose differently. We can choose to lead with purpose. We can choose to start with why, clarifying why our work matters, why our organizations exist, why our communities thrive. We can build systems that are human-centered, that prioritize people over short-term profit, that empower individuals to rise to their potential. Creating confidence in others is not easy. It requires courage. It requires patience. It requires a willingness to put the needs of others above your own recognition. It requires long-term thinking in a world obsessed with instant results. But it is the work that matters most. The work that transforms not just teams or organizations, but entire societies. The work that leaves a legacy beyond the limits of a quarterly report. So I challenge you, rediscover your why. Look at the people around you, not as numbers, not as resources, but as human beings with dreams, fears, and potential. Lead with empathy, integrity, and courage. Build trust before demanding performance. Serve something bigger than yourself. And in doing so, create confidence not only in others, but in yourself as a leader who makes a difference that lasts. When your leadership inspires confidence, it sparks a ripple effect. People feel safe to contribute their best. Teams become resilient. Communities grow stronger. And slowly, intentionally, with persistence and purpose, we create a world where leadership is defined not by authority, but by the courage to serve and the ability to uplift others. The question is not whether we can do this. It is whether we will. Will we rise to the responsibility? Will we put humanity first, even when it is hard? Will we be the leaders who choose service over status, long-term impact over short-term gain, and courage over comfort? The choice is ours. The work is ours. And the future depends on it. Leadership is not about authority or results. It is about creating confidence in others. Authority can compel action, but it cannot inspire belief. Results can be measured, but they cannot reveal the true health of the people who produce them. When leadership is reduced to power, metrics, and control, people may comply, but they rarely commit. They do what is required, not what is possible. True leadership begins at a deeper level, where individuals feel seen, trusted, and capable, where they believe their contribution matters and their presence has value beyond output. Confidence is not given through speeches or slogans. It is built through daily behavior. It is created when leaders listen before they direct, when they protect their people instead of exposing them to unnecessary fear, and when they choose responsibility over ego. People gain confidence not because they are told they are important, but because they are treated as if they are. When leaders create environments of psychological safety, individuals are more willing to speak honestly, challenge assumptions, admit mistakes, and take risks. These are not signs of weakness. They are the foundations of innovation, resilience, and trust. Authority-focused leadership relies on hierarchy and consequence. It asks, how do I get people to do what I want? Confidence-centered leadership asks a different question. How do I help people become their best? The first produces dependency, fear, and silence. The second produces ownership, courage, and engagement. When people feel confident, they do not need to be watched constantly. They do not need threats to perform. They take initiative because they believe in themselves and in the purpose they serve. Results achieved through pressure often come at a hidden cost. Burnout increases. Creativity declines. Loyalty disappears the moment a safer opportunity arises. People begin to protect themselves rather than the mission. In contrast, when confidence is cultivated, results become a natural byproduct. Individuals push themselves not because they fear failure, but because they want to contribute meaningfully. They hold higher standards for their own work because they feel trusted to do so. Creating confidence requires leaders to shift from being the hero to being the guide. It is not about having all the answers, but about creating the conditions where others can find them. Leaders who create confidence are comfortable saying, I don't know, and even more comfortable saying, I trust you. This humility strengthens teams. It signals that growth is valued over perfection and learning over image. Over time, people internalize that belief and begin to trust themselves. Confidence also grows when leaders are consistent. When values are clear and behavior aligns with them, people feel stable. They know where they stand. They know what is expected and what is protected. Inconsistent leadership creates anxiety, forcing people to guess which version of the leader will show up. Consistency creates confidence because it removes uncertainty and fear. It allows people to focus their energy on contribution rather than self-preservation. At its core, leadership is a service. It is a commitment to carry responsibility so others can do their best work. Leaders who understand this do not use authority to elevate themselves. They use it to create space for others to rise. They measure success not only by outcomes, but by whether the people around them are stronger, more capable, and more confident than before. Their legacy is not a number, but a generation of people who believe they can lead, contribute, and matter. In a world obsessed with speed and short-term wins, creating confidence can feel inefficient. It takes time. It requires patience. It demands emotional intelligence and moral courage. But it is the only form of leadership that scales sustainably. Confident people build confident teams. Confident teams build resilient organizations. Resilient organizations build healthier societies. Leadership that creates confidence does not dominate the future. It equips people to build it themselves. Fear-based, short-term systems deliver performance, but erode trust, creativity, and human potential. They rely on pressure, urgency, and consequences to drive behavior. And while this approach can produce immediate results, it does so by activating anxiety rather than inspiration. People respond because they are afraid of losing their job, missing a target, or falling behind their peers, not because they believe in the mission or feel connected to the work. Fear may sharpen focus in the moment, but it narrows perspective, limiting how people think, collaborate, and contribute. When fear becomes the primary motivator, trust is the first casualty. Individuals stop being honest because honesty feels dangerous. Mistakes are hidden instead of examined. Questions go unasked. Feedback becomes filtered. Over time, people learn that survival depends not on learning or improvement, but on appearing competent and avoiding blame. The organization may continue to move, but it moves blindly, disconnected from the reality on the ground. Leaders believe they are in control, yet the truth is being withheld from them by the very systems they created. Creativity cannot survive in environments dominated by fear. Innovation requires experimentation, and experimentation requires the freedom to fail. Fear-based systems punish failure even when it is intelligent or necessary. As a result, people default to safe ideas, familiar processes, and incremental improvements. Original thinking is suppressed, not because people lack imagination, but because the cost of being wrong feels too high. Over time, organizations that once thrived on creativity become rigid, reactive, and increasingly irrelevant in a world that demands adaptability. Short-term thinking reinforces this damage. When leaders prioritize quarterly numbers, immediate wins, or visible outcomes over long-term health, people are treated as tools rather than human beings. Workloads increase, recovery disappears, and burnout becomes normalized. Exhaustion is misinterpreted as commitment. Stress is framed as strength. Individuals are praised for sacrificing their well-being until they can no longer sustain it. The system extracts value without replenishing it, and eventually the supply runs out. Human potential is not limitless when fear is constant. Chronic stress impairs judgment, reduces empathy, and weakens resilience. People become reactive instead of thoughtful. Collaboration turns into competition. Instead of supporting one another, individuals focus on protecting their position. The organization may still achieve targets, but it does so by consuming its own people. Talent leaves, disengagement spreads, and those who remain do only what is necessary to avoid risk. Fear-based leadership also creates dependency. When people are conditioned to wait for direction and approval, they stop thinking independently. Initiative declines, ownership disappears. Leaders become bottlenecks, believing they must control every decision to maintain performance. This further reinforces short-term thinking as leaders focus on managing symptoms instead of addressing root causes. The system becomes fragile, unable to adapt without constant oversight. The most damaging effect of fear-based systems is that they disconnect people from meaning. Work becomes a transaction, effort exchanged for reward, compliance exchanged for security, purpose is replaced by pressure. When people no longer understand why their work matters beyond hitting a number, motivation fades. Without meaning, discipline feels forced. Without trust, commitment cannot exist. The organization may function, but it no longer inspires. Trust, creativity, and human potential flourish only when people feel safe, valued, and respected. Systems designed around fear may look efficient on paper, but they are inefficient at the human level. They generate motion without momentum, activity without alignment, results without resilience. Over time, the cost becomes unavoidable, not just in performance, but in the erosion of humanity within the system. Sustainable success requires a different approach, one rooted in long-term thinking and human-centered leadership. When leaders choose to build trust instead of fear, they unlock discretionary effort, honest dialogue, and collective intelligence. When people are allowed to learn, rest, and grow, performance becomes more consistent and more meaningful. The strongest organizations are not the ones that extract the most in the shortest time, but the ones that protect their people so they can contribute at their best over the long run. Trust, empathy, and service are the foundations of sustainable, human-centered leadership. Without them, leadership becomes a mechanical exercise focused on control and output, rather than a human responsibility centered on care and growth. Trust is what allows people to operate without fear. Empathy is what allows leaders to understand the human cost of decisions. And service is what ensures power is used to benefit others rather than protect ego. Together, these elements create environments where people can perform consistently, grow meaningfully, and remain connected to a purpose larger than themselves. Trust is built slowly and lost quickly. It is established through consistency, fairness, and integrity in everyday actions. When leaders say one thing and do another, trust erodes and people become cautious and guarded. When leaders keep their word, admit mistakes, and act in alignment with shared values, trust strengthens. In high-trust environments, people do not waste energy protecting themselves. They speak openly, collaborate more freely, and take responsibility for outcomes. Trust reduces friction, allowing teams to move faster and with greater cohesion over time. Empathy gives leadership depth. It is the ability to understand how decisions affect people, not just metrics. Empathy does not mean lowering standards or avoiding accountability. It means recognizing that people are not machines and that performance is deeply influenced by emotional and psychological conditions. Leaders who practice empathy listen without rushing to fix, acknowledge stress without dismissing it, and consider context before judgment. This creates loyalty because people feel understood, not managed. Empathy allows leaders to address problems at their root rather than reacting to symptoms. Service redefines the role of a leader. Instead of asking what the organization can provide them, service-oriented leaders ask what they can provide the organization and the people within it. Authority becomes a tool for protection and enablement, not control. Leaders remove obstacles, create clarity, and ensure their teams have what they need to succeed. This shift changes the dynamic of leadership from domination to partnership. People follow not because they have to, but because they want to. Sustainability in leadership is not about endurance through pressure, but resilience through care. Systems built on trust, empathy, and service. Recognize that people need recovery, development, and meaning to remain effective. Burnout is not seen as a personal failure, but as a signal of systemic imbalance. Leaders who think long-term understand that protecting well-being is not a soft ideal, but a strategic necessity. Healthy people create healthy organizations, and healthy organizations are better equipped to navigate uncertainty and change. Human-centered leadership also strengthens accountability. When trust is present, people hold themselves to higher standards. When empathy is practiced, feedback is received as guidance rather than attack. When service is visible, responsibility is shared rather than avoided. Performance improves not because of fear, but because people care about the impact of their work and the people they work with. Accountability becomes a commitment to the group rather than a response to punishment. In a world driven by speed, competition, and short-term results, trust, empathy, and service can appear inefficient. They require patience, emotional intelligence, and moral courage. They demand that leaders slow down enough to listen, reflect, and choose what is right over what is easy. Yet these qualities are precisely what allow organizations to endure. They create cultures where people stay, grow, and contribute their best over time. Leadership that is human-centered does more than achieve goals. It shapes how people experience their work and themselves. It builds confidence, fosters belonging, and creates a sense of shared responsibility for the future. Trust allows people to be honest. Empathy allows leaders to be wise. Service ensures that power is used to elevate rather than exploit. Together, they form the foundation of leadership that strengthens individuals, organizations, and societies from the inside out. Starting with why, clarifying purpose aligns people, inspires courage, and fosters resilience. When individuals and organizations are clear about why they exist, decisions gain coherence and actions gain meaning. Purpose acts as a compass, guiding behavior when conditions are uncertain and pressure is high. Without a clear why, people may remain busy and productive, but their efforts lack direction, leaving them exhausted rather than fulfilled. Alignment begins with clarity. When people understand the purpose behind their work, they can see how their role contributes to something larger than themselves. This shared understanding reduces confusion and internal friction. Instead of competing priorities and siloed efforts, teams move in the same direction, making better decisions with less oversight. Purpose allows people to prioritize effectively, especially when trade-offs are required. It answers the question of what matters most when not everything can be done. Purpose also inspires courage. When individuals believe in why they are doing what they do, they are more willing to take risks, speak up, and challenge assumptions. Courage does not come from confidence alone. It comes from conviction. People are braver when they know their actions serve a meaningful cause rather than a short-term target. A clear way gives people something worth protecting, even when the cost of doing the right thing is uncomfortable. Resilience is another natural outcome of purpose. Challenges, setbacks, and change are inevitable. What determines whether people endure or disengage is not the absence of difficulty, but the presence of meaning. When people are connected to a purpose, they can tolerate stress and uncertainty because they understand what they are working toward. Purpose transforms hardship from a reason to quit into a reason to persist. Organizations that start with what they do or how they do it often struggle to adapt. Strategies change, markets shift, and technologies evolve. Without a clear why, every change feels disruptive and destabilizing. In contrast, purpose-driven organizations can evolve their methods without losing their identity. The why remains constant, providing continuity while allowing flexibility in execution. This stability builds trust and confidence, enabling people to move through change with less fear. Starting with why also strengthens trust. When leaders communicate purpose clearly and consistently, people believe decisions are made with integrity rather than convenience. Transparency increases because actions can be traced back to shared values. Trust grows when people see that purpose is not a slogan, but a standard for behavior. Over time, this consistency creates credibility, which reinforces alignment and commitment. Purpose has a profound effect on discipline and performance. When work has meaning, discipline becomes internal rather than enforced. People hold themselves accountable because they care about the impact of their actions. Motivation becomes sustainable because it is fueled by belief rather than pressure. This internal drive is more reliable than external incentives, which often lose effectiveness over time. Clarity of why also shapes culture. It influences how people treat one another, how success is defined, and how failure is handled. In purpose-driven cultures, learning is valued over blame, and progress is measured not only by results but by adherence to shared values. Culture becomes a lived experience rather than a written statement. People feel a sense of belonging because they are connected by belief, not just by employment. In times of crisis, purpose becomes essential. When plans fail and certainty disappears, why is what remains? It provides a reason to stay committed when conditions are hardest. Leaders who anchor their decisions in purpose during difficult moments earn deep respect and loyalty. People remember not just what was achieved, but how they were treated and what they stood for. Starting with why is not a marketing exercise or a motivational tactic. It is a leadership discipline. It requires reflection, honesty, and the courage to choose meaning over convenience. When purpose is clear, alignment strengthens, courage rises, and resilience becomes part of the system, allowing individuals and organizations to endure, adapt, and grow with intention. True leaders prioritize long-term impact and the growth of others over personal recognition or status. They understand that leadership is not a performance to be admired, but a responsibility to be carried. Recognition is fleeting, titles change, and positions of authority are temporary. What endures is the influence leaders have on people and the systems they leave behind. Leaders who chase status may achieve visibility, but leaders who invest in others create value that compounds long after they are gone. Long-term thinking requires patience in a world that rewards immediacy. True leaders resist the temptation to optimize only for short-term wins or personal advancement. They ask how today, as decisions will affect people tomorrow, next year, and beyond. This perspective shifts priorities. Instead of maximizing personal credit, leaders focus on building capability, resilience, and trust within their teams. They recognize that sustainable success is not created through individual brilliance, but through collective strength. Growth-oriented leadership begins with humility. Leaders who are secure in themselves do not feel threatened by the success of others. They actively create opportunities for people to learn, stretch, and lead. They share credit generously and take responsibility when things go wrong. This behavior signals that the leader's identity is not tied to being the smartest person in the room, but to the success of the people around them. Over time, this creates a culture where growth is expected and supported. Personal recognition often distorts decision-making. When leaders prioritize image, they avoid risks that might fail publicly and pursue initiatives that enhance visibility rather than value. They protect their reputation instead of confronting hard truths. In contrast, leaders focused on long-term impact are willing to make unpopular decisions if they serve the greater good. They accept short-term discomfort in service of future strength. Their confidence comes not from applause, but from alignment with their values. Investing in the growth of others multiplies leadership capacity. When leaders mentor, coach, and develop people, they create organizations that are less dependent on any single individual. This decentralization of capability increases agility and resilience. Teams become more autonomous, more innovative, and more accountable. Leaders who prioritize development understand that their ultimate success is measured by how well the organization functions without them. Status-driven leadership often creates fragile systems. When authority is centralized and recognition is hoarded, decision-making slows and morale declines. People become hesitant to act without approval, fearing missteps that could reflect poorly on those above them. Growth stagnates because opportunity is limited. In contrast, leaders who elevate others create systems that are adaptable and strong. People feel trusted to contribute, and that trust fuels engagement and responsibility. Long-term impact also requires leaders to think beyond their own tenure. True leaders prepare successors, not out of obligation, but out of commitment to the mission. They document knowledge, share context, and create pathways for future leaders to succeed. This forward-looking mindset ensures continuity and stability even through change. The organization becomes greater than any one leader, which is the ultimate sign of effective leadership. Choosing growth over recognition reshapes how leaders measure success. Success is not defined by visibility or personal accolades, but by the confidence, competence, and character of the people they have influenced. Leaders find fulfillment not in being needed, but in being replaced by capable individuals who carry the work forward. This shift from ego to impact transforms leadership from a role into a legacy. In environments where competition and comparison dominate, this approach can seem countercultural. It demands restraint, self-awareness, and a willingness to serve without immediate reward. Yet it is precisely this discipline that builds enduring organizations and healthy cultures. Leaders who prioritize long-term impact and the growth of others, create systems that outlast trends, withstand adversity, and continue to serve people with purpose and integrity. All of this brings us to a simple but demanding truth. Leadership is a choice we make every day. It is a choice to replace fear with trust, control with service, and short-term wins with long-term responsibility. It is the choice to start with why, to build systems that protect human potential, and to measure success not only by what we achieve, but by who we become in the process. The world does not suffer from a lack of talent or ambition. It suffers from a lack of leaders willing to put people before their own status and purpose before their own comfort. The future will not be shaped by those who seek power, but by those who create confidence, by leaders who help others believe they are capable, valued, and needed, by leaders who understand that when people feel safe, trusted, and inspired, they will give more than compliance, they will give their best. If we choose to lead this way, in our organizations, our communities, and our lives, we do more than succeed. We build something that lasts, something worthy of those who will come after us. Something that proves leadership was never about being in charge, but about taking care of those in our care.